Welcome back. This is going to be a video about just pertaining to the valve sizes and its configuration within performance engines or factory engines for that matter. What I've drawn up on the board is kind of like the perfect scenario when it comes to the approach to the valve on any performance head. So we realize that the curtain area is the area around the valve and the seat. So the area between the seat all the way 360 degrees around the valve is the curtain area. So the more lift the valve has, the bigger the curtain area. Now, depending on the location of the valve in the combustion chamber also determines the window, because it's not just the area between the valve and the valve seat. It's also the area between the cylinder wall or any obstruction to the valve. Most of your V8 cylinder heads out there are going to have some kind of a cant to the valve. So whether it's the 23 degree valve angle of the small block Chevy, 20 degree to the small block Ford, or the 18 degree valve cant on the wedge style combustion chambers of the small block Chrysler. Obviously that is changed depending on which engine family you're also talking about, whether it's an inline valve situation or a canted valve or off-center type canted valve or a Hemi cylinder. So this information is going to be pertaining to wedge style inline valve configurations. Now, while many machinists or performance enthusiasts are going to argue over the proper seat cuts and angles, you'll hear the adage of a 3-angle valve job. Okay, that's basically turning the seat and valve contact points at 45, and the areas leading up to that 45 degree contact point are rounded off, but it leaves a sharp edge. So the shearing effect as the air is traveling over those two surfaces, whether it be the seat or the valve, it allows molecules of fuel that might be concentrated into droplets to be sheared off to turn into the atomization form that will ignite much faster. So the debate between a 45 degree valve angle or a 50 degree valve angle is not necessarily determined by the engine family. It's more about the combustion chamber shape leading into the valve seat area. Shallower combustion chambers, like the newer LS combustion chambers, they will take advantage more of that 50 degree valve angle compared to a deeper combustion chamber, such as the earlier edition of the wedge style combustion chambers, whether it be from Chrysler, Ford, or Chevy. Now, the cylinder wall or approach area into the valve should be a continuous transition. Okay, so while most individuals will argue over that 90 percentile ratio of the throat of the opening of the port compared to the valve size, okay, so if the valve is a 202, 90 percentile is the area at the shortest distance across the throat of the port. That's deceiving because it is also the area behind the seat. So into the port, this area here is very important. Now, if you watched the previous video about the venturi, the limitation of air is created by the smallest point or pinch point within the intake system. So the seat area being 90% of the actual throat, that is going to be a restriction. So any engine combination that uses an increased valve size is going to pick up on airflow until it starts to encroach on the cylinder wall. So again, going to the wedge style chambers, this area here, the pinch point between the cylinder wall or any of the casting material that's in the combustion chamber itself, can create a restriction within flow to that side. Okay, so normally on a wedge style chamber, the spark plug side of the combustion chamber is going to be where majority of your flow actually occurs. It's not going to be over the short turn radius into the cylinder. Also on the side with a straight inline valve configuration, the cylinder wall also creates an area of resistance. That is to incorporate swirl into the combustion chamber for all of your wedge style combustion chambers. Now, in order to get higher compression, some of the earlier manufacturers reduced the combustion chamber side of the cylinder head by filling it in on the spark plug side. This area right here is very vindictive of low lift flow numbers. So if you are working with limited lift camshafts or restricted camshaft lifts like in circle track racing, the bump of compression that you would get from going from a 76, 72 cc combustion chamber to the 58 or 65 cc of the 305 cylinder head or the performance camel humps, your low lift numbers would actually be restricted with the high performance head. It wasn't until you lifted the valve above 500 thousandths before it would allow the valve in the area, the curtain area, to open enough to be unrestricted. Okay, so that's what's really simple with today's video. Individuals ask me about the big block Chevy cylinder heads, the peanut port to the rectangular port. In almost every instance on a big block Chevy, because the canted valve orientation, the valve is opening up away from the cylinder wall. So instead of just having the 23 or 20 or 18 degree valve angle on a wedge style combustion chamber, the canted valve engines, the valve is not only canted away from the cylinder wall, or excuse me, from the center of the block angle, it's also canted so that the valve opens away from the restricted portions. So by any means, no matter what cylinder head you're talking about with a canted valve, whether it be the Ford Clevelands or the big block Chevys, going to a larger valve is always going to increase flow. It's simple as that. By creating a larger curtain area, you're going to increase flow. Even on the peanut port big block cylinder heads of the big block Chevy, going from its factory size to say a 225 or 230 will give you a major difference in flow even out of the restricted peanut port. So when we compared the smaller cubic inch engines of the 396 or the 383, the Chrysler wedge style chamber, if you go to an extremely large valve, you're actually creating more resistance with going to a larger valve. Sometimes the smaller valve actually flows more air. But when it comes to a canted valve cylinder head, getting the largest valve size incorporated into the head will always add air. Okay, so allowing more of the vacuum to be drawn on the intake system. The vacuum will pull in what it needs. Okay, it's that simple. So in the unrealistic configuration here, the perfect venturi or perfect port is a straight line with a venturi between the valve seats and the actual smaller portions of the port. So the bowl area here is actually going to be more evident to performance than the rest of the port up here. Addressing the reversion. This is that simple. Now, after my last video, I seen that Darren Morgan, if you're on Facebook, if you're on the Small Block Chrysler Facebook group, a video from Darren Morgan was shared talking about the anti-reversion designs, just like the exhaust side for individuals that have talked about anti-reversion exhaust. Something similar was also used within the intake ports of the intakes created by Darren Morgan and World Products years ago. It did not work. Okay, any sharp object leading into the port became much more of a restriction than it was as far as addressing the reversion. because even though the reversion was held more into the bowl area, it blocked the amount of air coming in with the fresh charge at a greater amount than it blocked out the reversion. So sometimes, even in the big block Chevy, the peanut port would create more power than the rectangular port because it would restrict more of the reversion from the bowl area into the port configuration. So below 4,000 RPM, the peanut ports actually had the advantage for anti-reversion, but that also restricted the capabilities over the RPM range. Between all of the big block Chevy configurations of the porcupine style head, again, this is not including the 409s, the peanut port, larger oval port, and rectangular port cylinder heads below 4,500 RPM, they all will react the exact same way in a engine dyno comparison. It isn't until the restriction of volume is realized within RPM. So even between the smaller 396 to larger 496 of the newer generation big block Chevys, going to a larger valve and addressing with a wider valve seat is always going to add to power. Without touching the port or doing any removing of castings, a lot of the performance is actually gained to going to a larger valve. With that, have a good one.